So let's start. Okay, so this is A levels IT chapter number 4, which is algorithms and flowchart, right? So this chapter says that in the end of this chapter, you should be able to edit a given algorithm. You should be able to write an algorithm using pseudocode to solve any problem. You should be able to edit a flowchart and you should be able to draw it as well. But before starting this, we will be first be understanding some of the terminologies, that what is an algorithm, what is a flowchart, like this. Okay, so let's start with here. So the basic introduction of this chapter is that in this chapter we are going to discuss that how can we develop an algorithm, how can we solve problems in an algorithm, and how a computer could follow in a form that is that we can solve the problem, right? That means that all computer programs are simply a series of algorithms that are written in a specific way that the computer processes that can then follow one at a time. Okay, so before initially starting this, we first need to understand that what is an algorithm. तो बेटा आपके पास an algorithm is a sequence of steps, a series of instructions, a series of steps that has to be followed whenever you are working with an algorithm. So the basic definition of an algorithm is that it is a series of steps. It is a sequence of steps. That means that, for example, right now, if I am taking my class right now, it is followed by some series of steps or some sequence of steps, right? That, for example, it is already understood that my class starts at 7 or 5 or 7 or 8 like this, and it goes until 8 or 5 or 8:10, but it consists of a series of steps, right? That means that to conduct my class, first of all, what I do is that I open my WhatsApp, I create a Zoom meeting link, I send you that link. So these are some number of steps that are recorded in taking a class, right? So this basically means that this is an example of an algorithm. And right along with algorithms, there can be certainly other examples as well, like making a cup of tea. So if I'm making a cup of tea, that is also an example of an algorithm. How is it? Beta, first of all, to make a cup of tea, you need to take some water, then you need to pour it into tea, then you need to add some milk or sugar. So see, these are some series of steps as well. For example, when we grew up, we were in our primary grades, and just after our primary grades, we started for the secondary classes, and then we are going to go into our colleges, then we are going to go into our universities, and so on. Like this, we will have it as a progression, right? So this is also some series of steps, sequence of steps. कहने का मकसद ये कि एल्गोरिथम बेसिक डेफिनेशन ये है कि आप एक सीक्वेंस के अंदर कितने नंबर ऑफ स्टेप्स लेते हो, आपकी जो है वो सीक्वेंस क्या है जिससे आपका एक काम प्रॉपरली सॉल्व हो रहा हो. तो इस चैप्टर के अंदर हमने ये डिस्कस करना है दैट हाउ आर वी एबल टू डेवलप एन एल्गोरिथम, हाउ आर वी एबल टू सॉल्व एन प्रॉब्लम जो कंप्यूटर के थ्रू हो सकती है, और कंप्यूटर प्रोग्राम्स जो है आपके पास कैसे होते हैं, सीरीज ऑफ एल्गोरिथम्स होते हैं ना, जो हमें एक स्पेसिफिक वे के अंदर लिखना है. तो बेटा ये आपके पास एल्गोरिथम्स होते हैं. एल्गोरिथम्स इज अ सीरीज ऑफ स्टेप्स दैट आर फॉलोड, जिनको हम फॉलो करते हैं. जैसे कि मैं ये कह सकता हूँ कि आई मे फॉलो अ लॉट ऑफ एल्गोरिथम्स विदाउट इवन रियलाइजिंग इट. जैसे मैंने आपको एग्जांपल दी, जैसे इफ आई गिव यू अ रेसिपी ऑफ समथिंग, दैट इज आल्सो एन एल्गोरिथम. इफ यू आर मेकिंग अ कप ऑफ टी, दैट इज आल्सो एन एल्गोरिथम. So these are all of the things that in real life we are actually doing, but we don't even realize that these are algorithms. But what is an algorithm? An algorithm is a series of steps, sequence of steps that is followed to complete a task. These are some of the examples of algorithm, but before you start to write an algorithm on your computer, you can design them. See, so algorithm, I just explain you what is an algorithm. Now, if you want to design your algorithm in your syllabus, you have two types of designs, right? The one design is the flowchart. The second design is the pseudocode. So let's discuss this as well. Okay, so this chapter is about algorithms. This chapter is about algorithms. I discussed with you what is an algorithm. An algorithm is sequence of steps. An algorithm is set of instructions. There can be many multiple ways or examples of an algorithm that you are doing in your real life and you don't even realize. Such as you can take the example of either making a cup of tea, or either if I give you an example of our regular class as well, right? Because all of the activities that I'm performing in my real life, it is accompanied by some number of steps. However, these steps are always in some certain sequence and they are completed to solve a specific problem. So do you have any confusion in these?
No, sir, it's clear.
Beta, to design an algorithm, I have two different types of ways. The first way is in flowchart.
Or
Second
pseudocode.
way is in pseudocode. Now, you need to understand the difference between both of them. That is, if I am giving you an example of a flowcharts. What is a flowcharts? Flowcharts are the pictorial representation. Flowcharts are the visuals. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can hear
Yeah,
you.
it might got disconnected. So I was discussing regarding flowcharts. What are flowcharts, bete? Flowcharts are the pictorial representations. These are the visuals that you create in order to explain a problem. And so the difference between a pseudocode and a flowchart is simple. Flowchart comprises of some symbols and some shapes, right? That means that it makes it easier. It makes it easier for you to understand. Why is that? Because it provides you with some graphical representation, right? Graphical representation, how is that? Because it can be defined using some symbols and shapes, right? And if I'm specifically talking about the symbols and shapes, that means that I'm able to draw like I have different tasks, and those tasks can certainly be, if I'm taking an example of an input process, if I'm taking an example of an output process, or if it is a process, that means that each and every of your option is going to have a separate symbol for that. So that's how it makes it easy for you to understand a flowchart. But you need to understand that an algorithm is the way that how you represent or how you are writing your program. But to design it, that's a completely different thing. So you can take an example of a flowchart, or I can certainly say that you can take the example of pseudocodes. Bete, what are pseudocodes? Pseudocodes are to be known as general way of representing your algorithm. It is a way that how you can represent your algorithm. And when it comes to a flowchart, that means that you will be using English words, or you will be using English statements, so that it is even better for anyone to understand that pseudocode. You need to understand that pseudocode is not a programming language, it is a way to represent your algorithm. And specifically when it comes to a pseudocode, you can use terms such as totaling, such as counting, right? So it is really easy to understand the concept of a flowchart. So when working with the algorithms, I can certainly say that an algorithm is a sequence of steps that we just discussed, and obviously we follow a lots of algorithms without even realizing it. For example, I can make a cup of tea, and following a recipe, or following a list of instructions that you have to perform in a sequence, right? So all of these are the examples of an algorithm. However, if you want to write an algorithm onto your computer, so you can do it by designing it using a flowchart, or by using a pseudocode. So I just explained you regarding it. So beta, what is a pseudocode? A pseudocode simply means that there is no specific syntax for that you have to use. It does not have to follow a set format, right? A pseudocode do not have a format. However, it is structured than English sentences. It is structured using English sentences, using English words. So if I summarize it, when it comes to a flowchart is a set of symbols put together with commands that are followed to solve a problem. And what is a pseudocode? It is a language that is used to display an algorithm. You can display an algorithm with the help of a pseudocode. Is this clear to you? Do you have any confusions?
Yes, sir, it's clear.
Okay, so right here you can see that this is certainly a simple form of an algorithm, and this is like I'm following a series of steps to move someone through a maze, right? The instructions we are using, that first of all it is FD5, that means that move forward 5 spaces. If it's BK2, that means move backward 2 spaces. If it's RT, that means turn right 90 degrees. If it's LT, that means turn left 90 degrees. So you have to start in the label space, start in the maze facing to the right. So this is just an example, or let's work on this one. So these are all the examples of an algorithm that you need to move, and you are provided with some set of instructions, so you need to complete those, right? So is this clear? Do you have any confusions in this chapter introduction?
No, sir, it's clear.
Okay, so I hope that now you are able to reply to these questions, that what do you understand by an algorithm, and how can algorithm be represented? Yeah, right? I just explained you. Now, if I'm discussing this about flowcharts and pseudocode, we have just discussed this as well. However, I just know that what is a flowchart? A flowchart is basically a diagrammatical representation. It's basically a pictorial representation. It is basically a visual representation that uses specific shapes and arrows, right? to produce an algorithm that someone can then follow. However, when it comes to a pseudocode, as I just explained you earlier, that it does not uses any symbols. However, you can take the example of structured statements. You can take the example of structured English languages, and pseudocode has no syntax rules as well. It does not has a specific criteria rules that must be followed, but it should use keywords, right? For example, input and output. Just right here, you can see that to start a pseudocode, I use a different symbol. It is to be known as some a circle with rounded corners like this. That means that whenever you want to work or start a flowchart, you can create the boxes like this. You need to specifically understand regarding the shapes, as they hold great importance when it comes to a flowchart.
Sir, I cannot see the shapes.
Can you see now?
Yes, I can see now.
A flowchart is a diagram that uses specific shapes to produce an algorithm that someone can follow. A pseudocode does not use symbols. So, what is a flowchart structure? These are the set of symbols that we can work onto it, right? These are the shapes that how you can start them, how you can stop them, and there are arrows as well that is in the flow lines. And when working with a flowchart, we follow some arrows, right? That means that algorithms don't go straight from start to stop. They also need some processes. These processes include input, output, process, decisions, and loops. I've just explained you this as well, that what is a flowchart and pseudocode. The difference is that flowchart uses diagram, it uses shapes, it uses arrows. However, a pseudocode does not use symbols. It uses English language, structured English. It does not have a certain format, does not have any structured rules. However, we can use commands such as input and output. These are the some symbols that we can utilize when I'm starting a flowchart, I'm ending it. You can see that I can work on these, that every flowchart begins and ends with a terminator box, a start box, and the beginning box. It is a circle with rounded corners. And last is that in a flowchart, we can use the arrow lines, and when creating a flowchart, we need to follow those arrows. Algorithms don't go straight from start to stop. Input. They also need input, output, process, decision, and loops. These are the some functions that we have to perform while we are working with flowcharts. There are some key terminologies and keywords as well that you need to understand. So first of all, what is an input in a flowchart? That means that putting data into an algorithm. That means that I'm entering data with the help of a keyboard, or there is some other means. So that means that adding up the data. I'm entering the fields. When I'm specifically talking about output, that means that I am displaying data from an algorithm to the user. That means that I'm creating an output or I'm printing it to the screen. The third thing is that this is a process. This is an action performed to some data to make a change, right? This is a process, right? For example, if it's the example of an input, for example, I need to input the student age. It could be anything, but right here, this is an input process. I can enter it such as if it is 20, it is 15. Output now, I need to output the number of students that are passed into my class. Just following an algorithm, okay, I can output that as well. In the process, however, a process means that how the task is being performed. So we can work on it with any calculation such as x plus y, or if any of there is a value. So that literally means that it is a process. The last one is the decision making. A decision making is to be known as basically a comparison that is used to decide if code is running or not. The fourth part is the loop. A loop is the one that says that code that is repeated again and again and again and again, right? Do you have any confusion in these basic functions of an flowchart? That is input, that is output, that is a process, that is a decision, that is a loop. Do you have any confusions here? Hello, Bete, do you have any confusion here?
Sorry, sir. I thought I was speaking. My mic was close. Yes. No, sir. I have no confusion.
Okay, so now just after the basic functions of a flowchart, let's discuss that how can you create these symbols, right? Now, input and output. This is the first function of your algorithm, input and output. Algorithm often needs to output messages such as your text as well to the screen, and therefore to the user as well. So it may also needs to take data from the user and, for example, the keyboard. So if I am right now talking about the flowchart, the first function of a flowchart is the input and output. Now if you want the algorithm to output something to the user, for example, maybe a word or maybe a sentence or maybe a number, then you need to use your output, right? Acha bete, how can you do this? How can you create an output? That means that it works in this way, and you are going to create it like this. So this is basically a parallelogram. For example, uh, I want to print an statement that uh, so when I want to print a statement, first of all, I'm going to make a box like this, and now I want to create an output. So I can write like print age. That means that if in your algorithm, whatever the value is in this age variable, this is going to be printed. This is the first function of an algorithm, right? Okay, so just below that, you can also see an example of this right here. That after the word output, acha, you can either use output or you can either use print as well. That means that these can be used to output or print the statement. That means that, for example, if you want to put the text you want to display, you can simply write output. You can simply write hello world. This is how it is going to be displayed. The second function that we have is the input facility. And when working with an flowchart, you would notice that how the words are being output in a speech mark. This is because we can use the output function, and if a user wants to input or read data from the user into the algorithm, he can use an input box right there. So that means that I am now adding up the value. So I can certainly input the value with this box with this symbol in a flowchart. So that means that when the data is input into an algorithm, it needs to be stored somewhere. So this can be done by using a variable. What is a variable, bete?
A variable that can store any
Yes.
you can say number.
It can store value. Its value can be
Change.
changed throughout program execution. A variable is a name. What do you understand by a name? That means that it is an identifier that is given to a space in a computer memory. Let's say, for example, if right here I have a variable age. This is a variable. That means that I have provided it some space to enter all of my value. This would could be 17, 18, 19, 20, any value it has. So think of it like a box with a name. You could call the box my number, and you can enter the data into my number as well. So right here we can also discuss with you that what is a variable. Beta, a variable is a space in the memory of a computer, as just discussed to you, that has an identifier where you can store the data, and this can be changed. Beta, what is an identifier? This is the name given to a variable such as a subroutine or a function. Beta, what is a subroutine?
Um,
Subroutine is self-contained section of your program that completes a specific task. A self-contained section means that, for example, if you have an algorithm like this, and there is certainly a special section of your algorithm or program that is completing a task, so that is to be known as a subroutine. And when it comes to a function, I'm going to define you in depth regarding the difference between a function and a procedure. Achha, I have here another word that means concatenate. Now, concatenate means that how you can join two strings together. Achha, beta, what is a string? Beta, string is a data type.
yeah.
String is a data type, and beta string means that you have several lengths of characters stored, such as your full name. Like my name is Sir Muhammad Wamik Akram. So here the symbol for inputting a value into into is my number, that is right here. That means that whatever the value is going to add it into my number, I can use it by giving it an example of a my number. So we can actually align all of these terms together to create a flowchart. Just right here, as you can see, this is an example of a flowchart. It is started with these rounded circles. Then I have these parallelograms that are basically adding up the feature of an input and output. So do you have any confusion still here?
No, sir, no confusion.
Okay, so let's now start discussing regarding pseudocode. So can you define me what is a pseudocode? Hello, bete, can you define me what is a pseudocode?
Pseudocode is like programming written in English.
Acha. Before than that, first define me what is an algorithm.
And so an algorithm is basically a series of steps that you follow.
Okay. And how many ways I can design an algorithm?
Flowchart and pseudocode.
What is the difference between flowchart and pseudocode?
Flowchart uses symbols and pseudocode is a language.
Can you define me some functions of a flowchart?
The you can say an oval is start and stop,
Hmm.
and
Input,
and
output.
yes, a rhombus is an input and output.
Hmm.
And what
What are the symbols I used in a flowchart?
in a flowchart you only told me think two
Yes, those are a circle with rounded corners, and there is the other one that is
is a
parallelogram, right?
tilted rectangle.
Hmm. Okay, so now let's discuss regarding this pseudocode. So beta, what is a pseudocode? A pseudocode is basically an output in a pseudocode can use commands and words such as output, write, or print. For example, you are printing out hello world. The word hello world is an example of a string in a flowchart. So they have still in speech marks. So anything that is in these inverted commas, these are to be known as speech marks, and anything that is written in between of them, it comes exactly displayed into your program. There are many different words that you can use to output data. However, they can perform all the tasks. For example, right here you can see output hello, write hello, print hello. All of these are one example of a pseudocode, that how you can implement a pseudocode. So an input in a pseudocode can use commands and words such as input, so that you can input or add the value. Like for example, right here you can see that number is equals to input. That means that the variable number is being added it into our program. That means that now the user is required is to input the number whatever he has, right? And for example, right in this example, the user don't actually know that what to input. So you can even write this in a speech marks to tell your user that now here you need to input your number, right? Like number equals to input, and in speech marks you need to enter a number. So this basically means that you are entering a number. So, for example, in worked example 4.02, we can see that there is an algorithm. An algorithm needs to ask a user to enter their name. It should take the name as input and then welcome them as, for example, welcome Sasha. So first of all, we need to draw a flowchart for this algorithm and start by identifying the steps required. So first of all, in step one, it says that we need to ask them to enter a name, then we need to require it as input, then we need to welcome them by their name. So you can see that I am starting the algorithm with the basic function of this start and stop. That's simple. You know it how to start an algorithm. You know it how to stop an algorithm. We use the same. We use the same symbols in a flowchart, and then now you are displaying the information. That means that you need to use this shape and you need to use the output command. That means output enter your number. Then again, this is input and output uses the same symbol. Then just after telling your user that what thing you need to enter, you have inputted the name, and the last thing you have created an output and stop. So do you have any confusion in this?
No, yes, it's clear. No, sir, it's clear.
I think that you are able to complete these questions as well. That question number 3 and question number 4
Yes.
identifies the symbols for start and stop in a flowchart we just discussed. Describe the stages in this flowchart. Can you do it?
Mm,
Beta
yes.
stages such as input, output, process. Like
Yes, sir.
now, let's discuss processes. But